All right. We are live, Miss Claudia. How are you?
I am very well. Thank you. How are you?
I am well. And let me just say this, that Claudia and I have known one another for a long time, over a decade.
2004,
Four.
five?
Yeah. So we actually went to law school together. And although it felt like I was a part of your class, I was a year below you. So you graduated, I believe, in May of '07.
Mhm.
And I was
Well,
in,
a little early, December of '06, with
oh,
the
did
class
you?
of '07. I went summers. Time
Okay.
is money. So,
So I graduated in December of '07.
yes, you understand then. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I asked Claudia to come on because we have kind of seen one another throughout our practice throughout the years. And for the time that I had my law practice based out in Johnson County, I saw Claudia a lot. Claudia has an excellent reputation and did a lot. You did I mean, most of your career has been surrounding family law. Is that accurate to say?
Mhm. All of
Okay.
it. Yeah.
So all of your career, all of your legal career. And so I wanted to talk with you because last week we did a video, a live video with Miss Perry, and she told the story of her DV situation, which was chilling. And I thought, man, I think it's important for folks to kind of see what the legal process looks like for someone who's involved in a family violence situation. And so we know last week we were coming from perspective number 2 regarding Bible study perspectives. And I thought of Claudia. I thought she would be an excellent person to kind of chat with, and so folks could kind of understand what that process looks like. Yeah. So welcome, Claudia. Thank you for being on with us.
It's my pleasure.
So, is there any part of your history that you want to talk about just regarding your legal work?
Well, I've done several different types of well, I should say I've been in several different types of employment. I started off at a pretty large firm for family law practices, and then I was there for a few years. Then I was on my own for a while, and then I about 4 years ago went to Kansas Legal Services, and then about a year ago came here to Safe Home. So I've been doing nonprofit for almost, well, it's like 3.5 years.
So 3.5 years. So you're currently at Safe Home, but before that you were at Kansas Legal Services, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so talk to me about the differences in the work that you did at Kansas Legal Services and then now at Safe Home.
The work itself is pretty similar. I work with, when I was at Kansas Legal Services, I worked with victims of crime, which could be any crime at all, whether it was identity theft or domestic violence or sexual assault. In practice, the vast majority of people I worked with were victims of domestic violence, seeking protection orders or protection from stalking, that sort of thing. Most of the clients, we covered a much bigger geographic area at Kansas Legal Services. It's a statewide nonprofit law firm. It's legal aid in Kansas. And so it was 6 counties, which included Johnson and Wyandotte and Leavenworth, Franklin, Miami, and Lynn County. And then now at Safe Home, most of my clients come through as Safe Home clients before I'm not their first point of contact. We are an agency providing all kinds of services for survivors of domestic violence, which includes sexual assault and all of those things you can imagine. And I get referrals from the community, but also from inside Safe Home, who are with people who are working with our other service providers within Safe Home itself.
So, Claudia, how would you describe a high conflict custody case? So I had some of them, and they were always like, poof.
Yes, yeah, no, they're hard for everybody. It's hard for the parents. It's hard for their families. It's hard for the kids. Number one, I mean, that's the hardest part to stomach. But I think any case has it's possible for any case to be high conflict. So high conflict, I look at as a spectrum. And there are different points in the case where it might be high conflict. But I think a high conflict custody case is when parents are unable to ever come to an agreement, that every little thing is a conflict and there is no give and take, there is no compromise, and it's the parents unable to put what's best for their kids ahead of that conflict. It's like being stuck with the fighting each other. And it's even more difficult, I think, in a dynamic with domestic violence, because it is so, as hard as it is for people who don't have DV going on in their relationship, for just a typical relationship can be high conflict. You don't have to have that other dynamic. When you're not ready to be emotionally divorced or separated, then that high conflict is going to be harder to overcome. And it only takes one person to make it high conflict, but it takes two people to get it out of being high conflict.
And that's such an important point. Sometimes it's literally one person, right? You have someone who's ready to move on, ready to kind of get to that next phase, and one person being stuck can cause so much chaos in cases. So how do you help support someone who is involved in a DV case? And before you answer that, I just wanted to definitely highlight that Mark says hello.
Hi, Mark. He couldn't let this go without saying hi.
Absolutely. I know you.
You knew me before. I knew you before. Anyway, I think when you say, how do you support somebody who's in a high conflict, I mean, as their attorney or just for anybody or both?
Well, yes, let's talk about both. Let's talk about your role as an attorney. Maybe there's a young attorney who's they want to get involved in this. I would definitely say that there's a certain way that you have to work with folks that have been with someone who has been involved in a DV situation. Like, it's different than like your typical custody case.
It is. I think if somebody has been in a DV situation, and when we say DV, we mean domestic violence, and that can be anything from emotional violence, emotional abuse, financial abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. There's all different kinds. It doesn't have to be, I've got a black eye every other week. That's not the only DV situation that we're talking about. Any of those where power and control are used to manipulate and get somebody to do something, that is a DV situation. As an attorney, that there is such thing as trauma-informed care for attorneys, and understanding that the difficulties that type of client is going through are very different and very nuanced. And clients are hard, so they are not the easiest people to love and to serve. And when you're working with people who have gone through DV, it can seem like they're even harder to serve than your normal client, but it's actually they're suffering from trauma and they need additional help. That's something beyond what an attorney can provide them. So we want to make sure every client has access to therapy, but especially survivors. That is the only way. You can't get rid of cancer without treatment. And I use that analogy all the time. If you needed a doctor and chemo to get rid of the cancer, you need a doctor and treatment to get rid of the DV and what it does to a person. It doesn't go away on its own, just like addiction.
Yeah. Claudia, so just a point in that, like last week when I was talking with Miss Perry, before I interviewed her, I asked her, before we had our conversation, rather, I asked her, are you okay to talk about this? Because people can go through something, even if it's 10 years later, and never have really dealt with it, and it's a trigger. So I love that you said that your role as an attorney is to absolutely handle the legal part, but also understanding that folks that have been through a domestic violence situation need more. They need to go to therapy. They need to make sure that they are taking care of their inside.
Right. Well, and also you don't want the first time that they start processing what's happened to be when they're on the stand trying to testify about what's best for their kids, or when they're meeting with the custody evaluator or any other service provider. We want them to be composed, even if you have to fake it a little bit, because this is going to affect the big picture and affect the kids. So definitely having those other people involved to help support the client. But high conflict custody cases, my best advice, and I give it to everybody, is that you have to make a choice in the very beginning that the most important thing is your kids. And if that means that you have to shut your mouth and swallow your pride and give up some of what you think you want to do for the benefit of the children, then you're going to have to do it. And I have heard a lot of, well, he or she's doing this, that, and the other. I might as well do the same thing. Well, if you want your kids to have two bad examples, then go ahead and do it as well. But if you want your kids to have an example of what it looks like to be a responsible adult and a good parent, then don't fight this out. Don't go toe to toe. Don't go tit for tat. Let your kids see what it looks like to be put first and to feel what it feels like to be put first. That's what they talk about, the mental health professionals, about divorce and separation being so hard on kids, is because they feel that. They know when they can feel it, and they may not be able to label it, but they know, and it affects them when their parents aren't able to do that. So I always come back to what is best for your kids. It is best for your kids that you not call the police because their dad isn't he's not there to drop off the kids and it's 15 minutes past the time he's supposed to. Don't call the police. Tomorrow, go get them from school early. It's making those kinds of choices and pursuing remedies within the court system, which can be lengthy, and it is expensive if you don't have the benefit of free legal services, because there aren't enough to go around. I am fully aware of that. But still, reducing the conflict is the ultimate goal.
I love what you said about kind of thinking through, how does this affect the bigger picture? Mm-hmm. So when I was a guardian ad litem, that was absolutely kind of how I started every conversation. So we're going to do what's in the best interest of the child. It's like, you can be invited in on this. You can participate in, really, some of it is like revenge. They're angry about a few things, or maybe there are really some mental health stuff that's going on that is really coming out during this custody case. But focusing on the best interest of the child is important. And I love that example that you gave, because I literally just had this conversation with someone who is navigating a high conflict custody case where she was 2 minutes behind, and he was calling and saying, "Oh, I'm going to call the police next time that you're late." And it's like, 2 minutes? Like, let's not be ridiculous. Let's understand that we all need grace, and that sometimes folks are late, but you don't call the police and cause another trauma for your kids because of that. I love that you gave that real example that happens.
All the time, or hotlining, because kids are smart, and they may not know that they can triangulate and play the parents against each other. And they may have no intent to do that, but they do it. Kids know how to tell mom that they didn't have the best time at dad's, because mom's going to feel bad and give them extra hugs and extra love. And why don't we have exactly what you want for dinner tonight? So you don't, kids know how to get that extra good feeling from their mom or their dad. They know what to say. And so just having that sort of presence of mind that your children are not always telling you the absolute truth. They're telling you what you want to hear. And it's hard for me sometimes, because I'm like, oh my gosh, my kids, they didn't have a great day at school. And then I realize, they're probably lying. They probably just want to see me go, oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Like, nobody took your Sisu dragon. We haven't even seen the movie, and Sisu, the dragon from Raya, is like her favorite toy right now. But anyway, I digress. Kids don't always tell the truth, or they tell a different version of the truth. Like when I had a case once where dad put the kids in the garage for timeout, and it sounds pretty awful, but we put our son in the garage for timeout because our house is tiny, and our daughter just doesn't get timeout that much. But that's the only thing that makes him scared enough to actually correct his behavior. And so I started thinking through it, and it's just like, okay, it sounds bad, but we don't know the details. So it's the grace you talked about. And you had asked me a question and I forgot where I was headed with my comments. Do you remember? The real world situation and not further traumatizing your kids. And just making a decision early on that you want to do what's best for them. And that's going to mean making some hard choices, even when everything in you is saying, no, fight. No, he shouldn't get his way every time. And I think I mentioned something about hotlining things that maybe sound bad, but there are mandated reporters, and then let's have a conversation with your attorney within the next day and see if that's really something that warrants calling DCF or wherever you're located.
Yeah, so kind of about understanding that you're in a very vulnerable state right now, and so maybe you need to bounce this off of someone who can be unbiased. So that's really important as well.
Right. And not letting, if the other parent did it before on you, like that doesn't give you the right to do it now, because it's tough on the kids. It's tough on the system. And it's like, let's just take a step back and take our emotions out of it. And that takes practice.
It does take practice. So what do you do? I guess, are there any tips that you would have for someone who maybe is in a DV situation, which we know changes the dynamics of things? So someone who's in a DV situation and they are beginning a custody case, what are some mistakes that you've seen that you would say, oh, if I could, this is what I tell my clients that are about to enter into this situation? What are some of those tips?
Well, I think all kids who are involved in separating families or changing families should be in some type of professional therapy. And it is only to give, if nothing else, to give them coping skills and to have a safe place to voice how they feel. Because I promise kids they know what to say or what not to say around their parents, and having a place where mom and dad aren't there, and it's somebody who doesn't talk to mom and dad, that's a good outlet for the kids. So the first thing is to have that outlet. The other thing I would say is try to reframe it. Abusers can be dangerous, and it can be really scary when you know what a person is capable of, and then you're co-parenting with that person, and you have to have faith and hope that nothing's going to happen to your child when they're with that parent, that they're not going to hurt your child to get back at you, or they're not going to treat your child the way that you were treated. In the vast majority of cases, everything's okay, and it takes time to get there. But the bottom line is that this child has two parents, and the court is going to allow both people to be parents if they're there and they want to be parents and they do what's asked of them. It may not look the way they want it to look, but if there are good reasons for things to start off slowly with supervision, with reduced time, with supervised exchanges, we have a lot of tools in every court to help monitor or reintegrate or get to a typical arrangement. It is best if children have healthy relationships with both of their parents. And so if a parent is there and willing to do what the court asks them to do, then they're going to help facilitate that. So if that means that as a victim or a survivor of abuse, you need to work with your therapist to cope with that, and to know how your reactions can sometimes make that situation worse, and how you might be able to better react or prepare for it so that as the survivor, you don't make it worse or more difficult. And then also by having your children working with therapists and working with other service providers, talking to the counselors at school. It doesn't have to be, a lot of schools have group therapy for kids who are whose families are changing. And even just having that, if something happens or something goes wrong, we have this third party service provider in place who can observe if something's off or if the child feels safe and discloses. Those service providers are mandated reporters. So if something's off from a good litmus test, sort of starting from an unbiased place, they're going to report it. And that's going to be a more reliable source for that kind of information than the survivor. And I'll tell you, in the vast majority of cases, that doesn't happen. There's good reason to fear it, but you just got to work through it. You've got to work with your attorney and know that you've put every precaution in place that you can, whether it's supervision or, there's apps where parents have to check in every hour on the hour so that they can ping where that parent is. And if they don't do it, then you don't get the parenting time. There are also lots of services out there who can supervise parenting time. There are lots of family, hopefully you have a support system, or they can have parenting time. I had a judge in Wyandotte County suggest having parenting time at a restaurant where mom had a friend work. So it was just, somebody there who could just kind of keep a side eye on how things are going. And the kids don't have to know. And I thought that was a great idea. So it's trusting that, the vast majority of the time it works. So it's just trusting that those of us who are in the system and we've worked with it and we know the tools that are available, and getting help. And because it's hard to do by yourself without the DV and without the high conflict. So if you do have those issues, it's getting as much help as you can.
What is the app because sometimes the triggers and all that comes with like the direct communication between the parents, and there's one person who wants to not just talk about the kids, but wants to talk about so much more that they really should be discussing.
Or they disguise it as, it's best for our daughter not to move to a new house where you have your boyfriend and your suspicious friends, and are you seeing him now, and should our daughter be around him, or things like that. I see it all the time. There's several. Co-parenter is one. Our Family Wizard is another, and I think there's a few other out there as well. But as an attorney, I really like them because I can log in and see exactly what's being said back and forth. And also, there's a huge peace of mind that comes for a survivor knowing that my abuser cannot contact me except through that app, and the judge can get in there, his attorney or her attorney. If there's a GAL, the GAL can get in there, and it's all right there. And I've seen several police departments make arrests of violations of protection orders for parents communicating outside of that when the court has ordered that it all take place within our Family Wizard or co-parenter or whatever app is out there.
And I really love those apps because some of them, they even have like a temperature.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Like check your tone.
Like, are you sure you want to send this?
Yes.
You're sounding a little aggressive.
And that reminds me of another tool. And I forget who the author of it is. And we've talked about it for years among family law attorneys, but there's a method to communicate to reduce conflict. And it's BIF. It's the mnemonic BIF: brief, informative, frank, and firm. I've also heard, and I don't know for sure if it's friendly and firm or frank and firm. But if you take all the noise out, well, like this is what you did last time, so I'm doing this time, and taking all that stuff out, you just keep your communication brief. You keep it informative. I don't need any emotions to go with it. And you be frank and friendly or firm, and just say what you need to say and get off. Like, the doctor's appointment is at 10 a.m. Here is the address. We will be there 15 minutes early. You're welcome to join.
You're saying I can't say because you know that you've never come to any doctor's appointments in the past.
Or, as I told you 3 times before,
right?
Like all that stuff, taking all of that, it's just noise. That's the kind of stuff that just stirs the pot and keeps the conflict going. And that's it. Somebody at some point has to start being that bigger person. And I've, as hard as it is to swallow this statement, that I had a guardian ad litem once, not you, Chanel, totally different one, say that my client was, and this was years ago, this was when I was in private practice, say that my client was not able to step outside the role of victim. And at the time, and even now, like that's really hard to tell somebody that you've got to step outside of that role. But sometimes you have to fake it, even if you can't, even if you are still suffering the effects of what those years of abuse did, that's the expectation that you're going to be able to do that. That's what our courts want to see. That's what all the people involved in helping families get to a stable position to get them out of court. Because trust me, the judges, the GALs, they want you out of court. They want you in a place where things can go. But you have to be able to, and it doesn't happen quickly. But that's why we're here. That's why we exist, because your kids need you to be able to function with that abusive parent. And, they've got their own work to do. I don't work with people on that side or haven't for a long time. But that's why we say everybody involved in separating situations, separating families need to go and check in with the therapist to get skills that are necessary to cope and to move on and to hopefully be healthier and happier.
But there are organizations and there are classes and there are programs to help abusers.
Yes.
Yeah. So
there are some really great programs. They're called batterers intervention programs. Anger management is not the same thing as batterers intervention. There are lots of people who need anger management that are not abusers. There are lots of people who are alcoholics that are not abusers. There are lots of people that use all kinds of drugs that are not abusive. These are two separate issues. It might help, but it is not going to turn an abusive person into a non-abuser. Batterers intervention programs do have really good success rates. There is an organization out of Topeka, Family Peace Initiative. I have heard some of their numbers, I believe. Well, and even within the Kansas Department of Corrections, they have batterers intervention programs inside the prisons. And it's true for every kind of therapy. If the person participating is not committed and there because they want to change, nothing is going to come out of it. So the court can order this all day. And they do, even for criminal cases, they order it all day. And they order abusers to participate in these programs, which is good on one hand. But on the other hand, they can go through the motions and they can graduate the program, but they might still be abusers. And I tell my clients that you've got to let that partner go and go off and fix whatever it is or get healthy. And if they do, great. But trying to force someone to become a good parent or a good partner it's not going to work through force. It never will. They have to want to get out of the program what it's designed to do. And it can help. And it can, if somebody wants to learn why they behave in that way and come out of it with the tools they need to be able to make better choices, the help is out there. And there are lots of good. There are, I think it's the Attorney General's office that certifies the batterers intervention program. And there's different programs all across the state and different providers. And I'm pretty sure you can get the list from the Attorney General's website.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. But that's important because I believe in redemption. I believe in redemption, but I also believe that some people just shouldn't be together, right? After, and redemption doesn't mean that things go back the way that they were. I'm going to talk about the book and Adam and Eve. And we know that regarding what happened with them, because they decided to make a different decision, right? They ate from the wrong tree. They had to take a different path. Now, there was still redemption. It wasn't the original intent that was originally designed and created. And so we know that there's redemption, but that doesn't mean that there's that restoration of that trust or that trust has to be earned. I think this is such an important topic because sometimes people come into custody cases ready to battle, and that's literally the wrong mindset. Like, what's in the middle are your children. And so how can we all get through this process and still love one another, right? Not looking for that big day in court where I'm going to expose him or her and air out everything, and then think that somehow after the court case is done, you all are going to be able to function in a healthy manner. You're not. Like, you all have to live beyond the court. And the court system is not the place to figure out family. So,
right.
Excellent. Thank you for all the work that you do. You've done a lot in regards to service to families and to people who are in really difficult places. Is there any other kind of thoughts that you would leave us with besides therapy for the children is absolutely necessary, and to reframe the thought process if someone is a DV survivor going through the custody case? Any other thoughts that you would leave us with?
Um, I would just impart, like, get help, and I don't mean like, oh, you're going to fail if you don't get help, but there's so many supports out there. Talk to people. Your pastors and your lay leaders at church are almost always have really great resources, or they know someone who's been through it and they can reach out and find out what worked for those people. Who did you go to for help? There are lots of Facebook groups, but I think getting help and surrounding yourself with people that you trust and that have been there before will be an immense help. And, I love Jesus too. And I will tell you that God doesn't want us to struggle alone. And he puts people in our lives that he knows we can learn from and grow with, and trust that that's there for you. And so,
Connections are so important, especially when we're navigating difficult waters, but they're everything. So
yeah.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you for your work with Safe Home, which if someone wanted to find Safe Home, how would they reach out to you?
Our hotline is open 24 hours, and you can reach anybody or any program within Safe Home by calling our hotline. And it's, I had a graphic ready, but I forgot to pull it up. But our hotline is 913-262-2868. And in Wyandotte County, I know Friends of Yates has a program to help survivors. Safe Home, we serve Johnson County and Miami County. We'll help anybody from the metro. If you just Google domestic violence agency, you'll find somebody in your area. But as far as I know, everybody offers all of these services free to survivors of domestic violence. And you don't have to be in shelter to receive services from Safe Home. They're available for anybody. Shelter is just one of the many services that we offer. We do have therapy, and we have group therapy. We have housing programs. We have, there's just so many things that we can help with. So even if you're not sure, you should call, and it's 913-262-2868 or safehome-ks.org.
And I will make sure that I put this in the chat so that people can see it on the replay. So thank you, Claudia. And
thank you.
Definitely appreciate the work that you've done. And thank you to everyone who is watching and who will have watched on the replay. If you know someone, make sure that you share this with them, because sometimes people are going through things and we have no idea. So, all right. Have a great evening.
You do the same. Take care. Bye-bye.